I spend so much time on the road that I sometimes forget I have a home. I'm not exaggerating. I live in the back of my truck more than I do anywhere else. That week, I was driving through rural Georgia. It was one of those long, monotonous stretches of road, surrounded by low-lying forest and no living souls for miles. It was cloudy, but not raining yet. The muggy weather and gray skies made it feel like time had stood still. All I wanted to do was find a decent place to stop, grab a bite to eat, and take an hour's nap. But that's when everything started to spiral out of control. I parked the truck at a nearly empty roadside gas station. I grabbed a lukewarm coffee from the little shop and went back to the cab. When I opened the door, I was immediately struck by this smell, strong, metallic, salty. Like blood, but not exactly. I thought I might have spilled something by accident, so I went in to check. That's when I noticed that the carpet on the floor was completely soaked. Really wet, as if someone had thrown a bucket of water on it. I bent down and touched the carpet, and the water was cold. It had a different texture, thicker than regular water. And the smell, the closer I got, the more it seemed to be coming from inside the cab, as if it had permeated the walls. The first thing I did was look up. I thought it might be a leak, but the roof was dry. I ran my hand over the entire interior, tested the window, the windshield, and even leaned out and checked the outside of the truck. Nothing. Everything was dry. No sign of rain outside. The exterior was shiny, clean, and intact. I went back inside and closed the door. That's when I heard the noise. A drop. Then another. I looked around and saw, with my eyes wide open, a drop running down the dashboard, near the ignition. The water was coming from inside. But it didn't make sense. That was impossible. I started pulling up the floor mats, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The rubber underneath them was clean, but the smell was getting stronger. It wasn't just water. I started to feel a little dizzy, a little nauseous. It was like the smell was invading my lungs. It made me feel nauseous. I opened the door again to breathe. The air outside was normal. I closed it again and went back to look for a crack, something that could explain it. That's when I saw a dark stain starting to form on the passenger seat, out of nowhere, as if it were sprouting from inside the foam. The stain spread slowly, as if it were being absorbed from the bottom up. I touched it with my hand, and it came away wet. It was the same strange, thick water that smelled of iron. It had an almost imperceptible color, a bit grayish, almost red under the cabin light. I felt my fingertips tingle. I don't know if it was just my imagination or if it was really some strange reaction. I tried to start the truck to get out of there, but the engine didn't respond. No sign of life. The key turned, but nothing happened. The cabin was starting to feel like a suffocating aquarium. Everything inside was damp, heavy, saturated. But outside everything was normal, dry, calm. I started banging on the walls of the cabin, desperately, as if that would change anything. And then I realized, the humidity was rising. The windshield glass started to fog up inside, as if the cabin were being filled with some kind of cold vapor. I ran my arm over it to wipe it off and my skin stuck to it for a second, as if the water had a viscous consistency. I opened the glove compartment looking for something, a flashlight, anything, and noticed that everything inside was also damp. The papers, the manual, even the coins. It was as if everything was slowly being taken over by this invisible thing that only existed on the inside. That's when the radio turned on by itself. No sound, no frequency. Just a low, constant hiss, almost a whisper. But it wasn't a random noise. It sounded articulate. Like it had a rhythm. You know when someone speaks very quietly, almost without opening their mouth. That was the feeling. I felt paralyzed for a few seconds, with that sound going straight to the back of my head. I covered my ears, turned the radio off hard, and pulled the wires. And even after that, I swear on everything, I could still hear the sound coming from inside the dashboard, as if it no longer depended on any electricity. That was when I really started to panic. I grabbed my backpack and tried to run out of the cabin. But the door handle got stuck. I pulled hard, kicked, nothing. The door was dry, cold, without any signs of damage. It just wouldn't open. The sound of the dripping water got louder. The floor now had a layer of accumulated water. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw my own reflection. But there was something strange. My face looked paler, wetter, and my eyes were dark. As if the reflection was a second behind me, frozen, and not exactly following me in real time. That's when I started screaming. No one would hear me, of course, not here. But it was either that or go crazy. I screamed, and the sound seemed muffled, as if the cabin had become a cocoon. The walls seemed to vibrate slightly with my voice. Everything had a strange, internal echo, as if the sound was bouncing off of me. Water was now running down the sides of the cabin, coming out of cracks that hadn't been there before. The back of the driver's seat began to stain, as if something was pushing against it from the inside. That water wasn't just water. It was as if something was trying to get through. I felt exposed, watched. There was no way to explain it. Out of nowhere, everything stopped. No transition. No sound. No movement. The water stagnated on the floor. The smell disappeared as if it had never been there. The doorknob unlocked. I opened the door and jumped out without thinking. From the outside, the truck looked exactly the same. Not a drop. No sign of what had just happened. I stood there, outside, panting, looking inside the vehicle, trying to figure out if I had lost my mind or if it had really happened. I climbed back in, my hands shaking, and touched the carpet. Dry. Completely dry. The radio was off, the dashboard clean. No marks. No smell. I drove to the nearest gas station, still in shock. I stopped, left the truck running, and went straight to the bathroom to look at myself in the mirror. I felt dirty, as if the water was still on me. I washed myself compulsively. On the way back, I called one of the attendants and asked him to take a look at the truck with me. Of course, he found nothing. No leaks, no smell. He said I must have been too tired. And maybe I was. But it wasn't tiredness. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And what scares me the most is that it all disappeared without a trace, as if it had never happened. But I know it happened. Since that day, I've never been able to sleep inside the truck again. From the outside, it's just another person. But I know there's something wrong inside. Sometimes I think it wasn't water. It was something else, trying to manifest itself. To take shape. I've never been back to that stretch of road. And I try my best to avoid being alone for too long. Because the worst part of it all wasn't what happened. It was the way it ended. No explanation. No reason. And the feeling I'm left with is that it just let me go, for now. I don't usually stop to help anyone on the road, but that day was different. The sky seemed lower, the air was thick, and there was almost no traffic on Route 66. It was a somewhat forgotten stretch of road, in the middle of Arizona, surrounded by desert and silence. I had been driving for hours, almost on autopilot, when I saw the truck stopped on the shoulder. It was an old, rusty model, with its emergency lights flashing very dimly. There was no one outside. I slowed down, parked my truck a little further ahead, and walked back to see if I needed help. That's when things really started to bother me. The truck looked abandoned, but at the same time, recent. You know when you feel like something is out of place, but you can't put your finger on it? The cabin was closed, the windows were dark, and there was a tow truck parked right behind it, as if it had just arrived. But there was no sign of the driver or the tow truck guy. I approached slowly, walked around quickly, knocked on the cabin door, nothing. Total silence. I even put my hand on the doorknob, but it was warm, as if the truck had been turned off a few minutes ago. I went over to the tow truck and noticed that its engine was still warm too. It was as if everything had been frozen in a moment right after something had happened. I went back to my truck to call the highway services, ask for help or find out if anyone had reported that vehicle. I picked up my cell phone, but there was no signal. I thought it was strange, because that stretch of the road usually still has a weak signal. Even so, I stayed nearby, looking in the rearview mirror. That's when it happened. 3 minutes. No more than that. I literally blinked, and when I looked again, there was nothing left. The truck was gone. The tow truck too. Everything. That stretch of the shoulder was completely empty, as if there had never been a single vehicle there. I jumped out of my truck right away, ran to where the vehicles had been parked before, and there were no tire tracks. None. The dirt floor was untouched. No sign of braking, no oil stains, nothing. As if I had imagined it all. But I swear by everything I saw. I leaned against that truck. I heard the engine ticking as it cooled down. It was there. And then, it was simply gone. I stood there, like an idiot, staring into space. That's when I saw something on the ground, near where the tow truck was, a dirty, old cap, with the logo of a garage I knew. A small place, in a neighboring town. And I knew who it belonged to. It was Jack's. A guy I knew by sight. He had been working as a tow truck in that area for years. He had always kept to himself, but he was known for accepting any call, even at the most unlucky times. His garage was about 3 hours away. I grabbed my cap and ran back to the truck, turned on the GPS and tried to plot a route to the city where he lived. The system froze and gave errors. Until it finally loaded, and that was when I got goosebumps. The last recorded location of his tow truck was exactly where I was parked. Time? 3 minutes before I arrived. It was impossible for all of this to be a coincidence. And even more impossible, Jack had disappeared 3 days ago. His wife posted about it in a truckers group on Facebook. I got back on the road, disturbed. I couldn't get that out of my head. A few kilometers later, I saw another gas station and stopped. I told the attendant briefly what I had seen, trying to sound less crazy. He looked at me for a few seconds, with a strange expression, and said that the broken-down truck had been seen around there before. Always the same way, stopped, with a tow truck behind it. Some people tried to help and then simply disappeared. They were never seen again. Sometimes the truck would reappear at another point on the route, hours away from where it had been seen before. Always alone, always looking like it had just been abandoned. The local police had already opened investigations, but they never found anything. It was as if the truck didn't really exist. Or didn't want to be found. The attendant said that, in the last few years, at least 5 people had disappeared this way. Some witnesses claimed to have seen the truck before the disappearances, but the stories never matched. There was always a different detail, color, model, year. But everyone agreed on one thing: the truck seemed to wait. As if it was just standing there, stopped, waiting for someone to stop. When no one stopped, it disappeared. When someone approached, it would wait a few minutes and then disappear completely. I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to the place the next day. I had to. It was as if something had opened inside me, a lump in my throat that would only be released if I saw it again. And I saw it. There was the truck, stopped in the same place. Just the truck this time. No winch. No hazard lights. But the cab door was ajar. I approached, more cautiously. The ground around it was slightly marked, as if the tires had been spinning slowly, almost floating. I knocked on the side. Nothing. A silence that seemed to absorb the sound. That's when I heard it, a muffled noise coming from inside the cab, something like a whisper or a restrained sob. I approached the door and knocked. No one answered. The voice was coming from somewhere deeper inside the cabin, but I couldn't see anything inside. It was dark, darker than it should have been even with the daylight shining in. Something told me not to go in, but curiosity, or stubbornness, took over. I climbed the step and stretched out just enough to get a better look. There was nothing there. No bench, no dashboard. Just a dark, damp void, as if the inside of the truck had become a hole. It took my eyes a while to understand what they were seeing. It was like staring into an endless room, but with a familiar smell, like old engine and burnt oil. I took a step back, my heart pounding. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut on its own. A dull bang, as if it had been pulled from the inside. I ran back to my truck, started the engine, and drove away. I checked my rearview mirror about 10 times during the drive. I didn't see the truck again. I turned on the radio, changing the station several times until I found something normal to listen to and calm my nerves. But deep down I already knew, this was not something to mess with. I tried to tell some trucker friends later, but no one would listen. They said I must be tired, or hallucinating from lack of sleep. But there was one of them, an older guy, who just looked at me and said, "You got lucky. That's all. Don't try to understand." Since then, I've avoided that stretch of the route. To this day, I still think about Jack. And the others who disappeared. And what would have happened if I had gotten in the cab? Sometimes I wonder if that wasn't a test. If that truck wasn't waiting for someone more willing. Or maybe more desperate. Whatever it is, it keeps showing up. Every now and then, at some forgotten spot on the road. And every time someone tries to help, it turns into another silence. Another disappearance. Another hole without an answer. I only stopped because I thought I was helping. And to this day that phrase still rings in my head. He was there. 3 minutes later, he disappeared with the tow truck. As if time didn't have the same value next to that truck. As if everything around was just a stage set to swallow another person. I was lucky. That's all. But someone, somewhere, won't be. I always thought the road was the loneliest place in the world. But it was also where I felt most at peace. Just me, the truck, and the sound of the engine filling the silence. The routine was simple: drive, fill up, deliver, repeat. There wasn't much room to think, and maybe that was what attracted me. Until that day. It was dawn when I saw the illuminated sign appearing in the middle of nowhere: fuel stop, 24H. The diesel gauge was already touching red, and I was far from any city. I didn't think twice. I turned into the gravel driveway and parked. The place looked like it was from another time. An old gas pump, a faintly blinking sign, a small closed shop with its lights off. There was no one there, but the pumps were working. I grabbed the hose, started filling up, and noticed that the tank gauge kept rising, and wouldn't stop. When it reached full, the pump was still releasing diesel. I pressed the button to stop it, but it got stuck. I had to pull the hose out by force. I was suspicious, but tiredness won. I got in the truck and left. It wasn't until the next day that I noticed the first strange thing. I couldn't remember what I had eaten the night before. Zero memory. As if I had blacked out. I went back to the same gas station a week later, without thinking much about it. I only understood when I saw the sign flashing the same way. The place looked identical, as if it were frozen in time. No cars, no employees. But the pump still worked. And again, the tank filled up like magic. And again, the pump only stopped when I forcibly removed the hose. I thought it was strange, but I also thought, free diesel. Who would refuse it? But in the following days I noticed another glitch in my memory. I couldn't remember my wife's birthday. And we had been married for over 20 years. It was as if that date had disappeared from my brain. I started to get worried. I wrote down everything I remembered in a notebook: names, dates, important places. I followed the list every time I went back to that gas station. And every time I filled up there, something on the list disappeared. At first there were small memories, then came the important ones. The smell of my newborn daughter's room. The color of the car I bought with my first paycheck. My father's voice. Each time I filled up, a part of me was erased, without me being able to stop it. And the strangest thing? It was as if the truck became lighter. Quieter. As if it was feeding on that too. I started avoiding the gas station, of course. I started planning my routes better, filling up in advance, even though diesel costs more. But some nights, it would just appear. In the middle of the road, on stretches I knew by heart, it would appear as if it had always been there. Same sign, same pump, same absence of life. One night, I swear, I drove right past it and, 10 minutes later, there it was again. As if the road had taken a turn and brought me back to it. And the worst part was that the tank was almost empty. I had to choose between staying stranded in the desert or filling up and losing another part of myself. I gave in. Again. And when I got back to the truck, with a full tank of gas, I looked at my notebook. My daughter's name, erased. There was a blank space where I was sure I had written it. I grabbed my phone, opened the photos, and scrolled through until I found a picture of her as a little girl, smiling in a park. I stared at that picture for minutes, but I couldn't remember her name. Her voice. What it was like to hold her. All I had was the image. It destroyed me in a way I can't explain. It was like knowing you've lost something you love, but you can't remember what it was. I didn't drive for weeks. I left the truck in the yard, took some time off, tried to reconnect. I went to visit my mother. She hugged me, called me by my childhood nickname, and I had no idea where that came from. I had to pretend, smile, keep the conversation flowing, while inside I was falling apart. My memories were fading away. And the only constant was that damned gas station. The worst part was that, even when it was parked, sometimes I would dream about it. About the sound of diesel flowing endlessly. About the smell of old grease in the air. As if it had left a trace inside me. And when I started driving again, it was no longer an option. The gas station seemed like part of the route now. It appeared before I even needed it. The tank marked empty faster than it should have. One morning, I woke up with the truck parked there, without remembering having driven there. The pump was already attached to the tank. I got scared, took off the hose, screamed, but no one was there. And when I got back to the truck, I felt like something was gone again. The name of my hometown. Gone. And the more I tried to remember, the more distant it seemed. I started leaving myself notes, taped to the dashboard of the truck, trying to maintain some connection to who I was. But even the notes started to feel like someone else had written them. I would read my wife's name, for example, and feel nothing. It was just a string of letters. I knew she existed, but I couldn't remember her laugh, the texture of her skin, or the way she woke me up on Sundays. Everything was slowly being drained away, as if the truck was running on my memory. And the gas station? Always there. Like an open mouth waiting for me to fill up again. I once tried to burn the notebook where I wrote down my memories, thinking it would free me. But I couldn't. I felt like I was about to erase the last thread that kept me conscious. I put my notebook back and drove aimlessly, hoping to find a place where it wouldn't reach me. But I ran out of diesel. And guess what? It was there. The gas station. Always the same. Only now, I didn't even try to resist. I knew I was losing the battle. I just wanted to remember something. One thing. A smell, a sound, a name. Today, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. I shaved my beard a few days ago, or at least I think it was a few days. I'm not sure. The truck's calendar shows it was a month ago. The radio still plays my playlists, but I don't know who the artists are. I wrote on the dashboard, in big letters, what I had left: you have a daughter. She loves you. But even that doesn't touch me anymore. The tank is always full. But today I forgot my daughter's name. If you ever find that notebook, if you ever read those words, know this: that post is not a place. It is a decision. And every time you stop there, you don't just lose the past. You lose who you were, in every detail. And when it's all gone, what's left isn't silence, it's the emptiness of what you'll never remember existed. I've been working as a freight hauler between Seattle and Spokane for a long time, and I've driven pretty much every route possible, but there's one particular mountain range in Washington state that has always made me uncomfortable. I can't explain exactly why. It's a winding, foggy road surrounded by tall pine trees that make everything dark even during the day. Those who know it avoid driving at night. But we don't always have a choice. It was early November when I picked up one of these urgent loads and had to cross the mountain at around 2 a.m. It was completely silent, just the constant noise of the engine and transmission trying to climb the hill. The first night, I heard what I thought was an animal. A long, high-pitched scream coming from deep in the woods. It sounded like a coyote or something injured, but there was something wrong about it. It was too human. It gave me the chills, but I kept driving, trying not to think about it too much. The next night, I passed the same stretch, at the same time. And there it was. The same one. Exactly at 2 o'clock. Long, high-pitched, echoing through the trees, as if it were following me. I turned the radio up to drown it out, but even with the volume turned up, I could hear it over the music. Like it wasn't exactly an outside sound. On the third night, I stopped. I was exhausted and decided to rest for a few minutes in a recess in the road. I passed out for about 40 minutes. I woke up with a shock at 2 a.m. sharp. And there it was. But this time, it had words. Not many, just a few. Words scattered, shouted as if they were tearing through the air. But I understood. Help, come back, it's cold in here. The voice was distorted, but I could tell it was coming from a human throat. I jumped up from the seat and looked out the window, just fog and the silhouettes of trees. I felt like someone was standing right at the edge of the woods, just watching. That night I couldn't drive anymore. I stayed there, engine running, headlights trying to pierce the darkness. I didn't see anything move, but the screams continued for about 5 minutes, and then they suddenly stopped. I called the company radio, told them what had happened, and made up a story about a technical problem. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. The next day, I spoke to another veteran truck driver who had been doing this route for decades. He just looked at me seriously and said, "You heard it too, right?" "That's right. He screams every night, for years. But only at those who stop." I became obsessed with this. I started researching, reading forums, and discreetly asking at rest stops. And the pattern was always the same: drivers who heard screams at 2 in the morning on that specific stretch of the mountain. Some said it was the wind in the trees. Others said it was just the effect of oversleeping. But there were a few, always the quiet ones, who looked down and said nothing. As if they had already heard more than I had. I started avoiding that route, even if it meant hours more travel. But it was no use. On one of the alternative routes, the GPS redirected me back. And before I knew it, I was already climbing the mountain again. At 1:47 in the morning. I stopped before I reached the spot where I had heard the screams before. I decided I would face it, try to understand. I kept my headlights off, just the engine running. 1:59, absolute silence. And then, at 2 o'clock sharp, the scream started. This time closer. More defined. The words were the same, but more clearly. "Help, come back, it's cold in here." The last one seemed to come straight from the side of the truck. I shivered all over. I looked in the mirrors, turned my head quickly, nothing. I got out of the truck with the flashlight, shivering. The fog was thicker than ever, the air cold, thick. And then I heard it again, only closer. "Can you hear?" I almost dropped the flashlight. The voice seemed to be coming from inside the woods, a few meters ahead. I went to the side of the road and called back, asking who was there. Silence. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it, but then the sound came back clearer, almost whispering in my ear, "You left me." I ran out, went back to the truck without looking back. I started the engine, tried to put it in gear, but the truck stalled twice before finally starting. When I got out of there, I didn't look in the rearview mirror anymore. I had the impression that if I looked, I would see someone standing there on the shoulder of the road. I arrived at the next gas station shaking and sweating. I stayed in the restaurant until dawn, trying to figure out what had happened. When I told the cashier what I had heard, he didn't laugh or show any surprise. He just said, "You were lucky to get out. Some people hear the scream and never come back." I asked if he knew of anyone like that, and he told me about a truck driver who had disappeared there years ago. The truck was found turned off, headlights on, door open. But no one inside. No tracks, no signs of a struggle. Just the empty cabin and the radio on, repeating a hissing, almost imperceptible voice in the background. After that day, I promised myself that I would never walk through those mountains at night again. But something changed. Even though I'm far away, sometimes I wake up at 2 a.m. sharp, in a cold sweat, with the sound of the scream still fresh in my ears. I don't know if it stayed in my head or if it really left a deep impression on me. I've tried recording it, using my cell phone to capture anything, but it never picks up anything. Only I hear it. And every time I hear it again, the words change. Now, sometimes he says my name. Other times, he seems to speak as if he were someone I knew. Someone who never came back. I spoke to a psychologist once. He said it could be stress, that my mind created a narrative to deal with the trauma of the road. But I know that's not it. The voice has too many details. Intonation. Real desperation. It's impossible for that to have been invented by my head. I'm afraid to go back there, but something inside me feels like it will happen again, even if I try to run away. Because the mountain doesn't need you to go to it. If it chose you, it will come after you. And sometimes, I'm sure that the scream doesn't want help. It wants company. One night, halfway through a stretch of road in Oregon, I stopped at a secluded gas station to sleep. Around 2 o'clock, I heard a noise on the radio. A faint hiss, and in the background, a familiar voice, "You left me." It was the same phrase. The same intonation. But I was hundreds of miles away from the mountains. I turned the radio off right away. But there was this heavy silence, as if someone was in the back of the truck, just waiting for me to look. I didn't look. I never look. Because I know that if I look, I might see what I left behind on that road. And I might not be able to get out again. Today I continue to avoid the mountains, but everyone who drives around there knows what I'm talking about. Some hear it, others pretend they didn't. But everyone feels it. The road changes in smell, sound, and time. At 2 in the morning, everything becomes denser, as if something were breathing among the pine trees. And if you stop, listen. They weren't animals. The screams had words. Words I understood. Road trips are like that, you don't always get to choose where to sleep. Most highway motels are run down, with scratchy sheets and the smell of cigarette smoke. But on that trip from Nevada to Utah, I found a place that seemed out of the ordinary. A light blue sign with flashing white lights read, "Smile Inn, 24-hour comfort." The name was a little strange, a little forced, but the place looked clean and well kept. And I was too tired to be picky. I parked the truck, grabbed a change of clothes, and went to the front desk. The receptionist was there, standing still, smiling. A wide, fixed, almost, plastic smile. He greeted me in a low, polite voice and handed me the key to room number 4. He didn't blink once during the conversation. This bothered me, but I let it go. I went up to the room. It was clean, simple, and didn't smell of mold, which was a relief. I took a shower, ate a cold snack from my backpack, and slept like a log. The next day, I had coffee at the reception, where another employee, or at least I thought it was another, was also smiling the same way. Identical clothes, hair meticulously arranged, and the same fixed, unblinking gaze. But I moved on. 3 days later, I took a detour because of an accident on the main road and ended up going back to that exact spot. And there was the same motel. Estalagem do Sorriso, Conforto 24H. I thought it was curious, maybe it was a chain. I decided to stop again, just because of the coincidence. I went to the reception and there he was. The same receptionist. Same face. Same smile. Same tone of voice. But he didn't seem to recognize me. He acted as if it was my first time there. He gave me the same key. Room number 4. From that moment on, something really started to bother me. During the night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not many, just a light, rhythmic walk that came and went. I got up to look through the peephole. And I saw it. The receptionist, standing there, smiling, staring at the door. For about 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked away as if nothing had happened. I couldn't sleep anymore. The next day, when I went to hand over the key, he was there, standing in the same position. Smiling. Without blinking. He thanked me in exactly the same way as the day before. Same intonation, same words. I started to think it was some kind of joke, or a themed motel, I don't know. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I got back on the road determined to forget about it, but on the way, I remembered a strange detail: the security cameras. There were several in the reception area, and they were all facing inwards. None of them pointed outwards, as would be normal. As if the danger wasn't the one who enters, but the one who's already inside. I tried to ignore it. But 2 days later, I took another detour because of a roadblock, and guess what? The same sign appeared on the side of the highway. Same building. Same style. Same name. I stopped the truck, got out slowly, and looked around. It was identical. As if someone had copied and pasted the place. I went in. The same receptionist. He greeted me, smiling, and gave me the key to room number 4. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen. I asked him if he remembered me. He kept smiling and said, "We're glad to have you, sir." The same sentence, the same way. I went to the room without even thinking about it, just on autopilot. But this time, I left the door ajar. I sat on the bed and waited. At 3 in the morning, I heard his footsteps again. I got up slowly, walked to the crack in the door, and there he was. Standing at the end of the hallway. Smiling. Only this time, he was bleeding from his mouth. A trickle of blood ran down, slowly, as if it were nothing serious. When he noticed I was looking, his smile grew. He didn't move. He just smiled. I slammed the door shut, locked everything, and leaned against the dresser. I sat leaning against it until dawn. When I came out, the receptionist was downstairs. Bloodless. Smiling. As if nothing had happened. I grabbed the key, threw it on the counter, and left without saying a word. I turned on the GPS and tried to plot alternative routes, but it seemed like any path would take me back there. I spent days without sleeping properly, walking as little as possible. But every time I had to stop, it was that place. Same building, same receptionist, same room number 4. As if there was no other place where I could rest. I started testing. I set the time, took photos, wrote down license plates. Nothing worked. The photos came out blank. The clock always stopped at 3 a.m. when the footsteps started. As if time was stuck there, stuck. A loop. And the smile, it wasn't just a gesture. It was a threat. As if he knew something I didn't yet understand. I became paranoid, sick, exhausted. I tried to warn other drivers, but no one took me seriously. One guy said he had stopped at that place too, and after that, he couldn't remember where he lived. I just drove, always in circles, always coming back to the same place. Last night was different. I pulled over on the side of the road on purpose, far from civilization, thinking I was finally going to escape. But when dawn broke, I looked over and the sign was there. Estilagem do Sorriso, Conforto 24H. It was as if the world was taking shape to take me there. I entered the motel determined to confront it. But when I got to the reception, there were 2 receptionists. The same. Same height, same hair, same suit, same smile. One of them said, "You're back. We're always waiting." And the other added, "Your room is number 4. I didn't take the key. I turned around and ran. I ran until I was out of breath. I went into the bushes on the side of the road and hid for hours. When I finally got the courage to go back, the motel was gone. Just dirt, as if nothing had been built there. I grabbed my cell phone. No signal. No GPS. None of the photos of the facade that I took the day before appeared in the gallery. Everything was erased. As if the place only existed when it wanted to be seen. But I know what I saw. I know it was real. And now, even though I'm sleeping in other places, I dream about the hallway. About the blue carpet. About the smile. That night I woke up to the sound of my truck's doorbell. Someone was outside. I opened the curtain. It was the receptionist. The same one. Standing on the shoulder of the road, holding the key to room number 4 in his hand. Smiling. Unblinking. I locked everything, started the engine and sped off. But I know it's no use. No matter where I am, he'll always find a way. And every time I try to run away, he comes closer. As if he weren't just an employee. As if he were part of the journey. As if he were now my destiny. On the third night, I realized that the receptionist was the same. Always. Same face. Same smile. And now I'm not sure if I left or if I'm just going around, going in and out of the same motel disguised in other forms. Because tiredness makes me think about going back. Just one more night. Just one more rest. And he knows it. That's why he smiles.